Congressman Joe Neguse, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Marshall.
Sure. Uh, it was tough to know where you stood with President Biden's reelection effort. Did you think he should continue running, or did you think he should drop out and chose not to tell that to Coloradans?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. So, first and foremost, I respect the president's decision. I agree with the president's decision. I thought he gave a very important and eloquent speech just a few days ago in explaining his rationale for why he decided to no longer proceed as the nominee of our party going into the November election. As you know, one of the privileges that I have in the House is serving as the assistant Democratic leader, assistant minority leader, essentially in the House, and so I was privileged to play a role in convening conversations between my colleagues on this precise question for the better part of a few weeks as we work to try to figure a way forward and enable members of the caucus to be able to share their views. And I wanted to certainly be careful about getting in front of my colleagues given my role in facilitating that process. As you probably know, that process culminated with ultimately Leader Jeffries sharing the full breadth of views from our caucus with the president directly. And as you also know, there were a diversity of views on that question that you posed, including within our congressional delegation. So, no, I mean, I think I'm certainly comfortable with the role that I played, given that leadership responsibility. And as I said, I think the president made the right call. I'm excited about the vice president's candidacy and looking forward to the road ahead.
So you said you think you made the right call, and earlier in that answer you said you agreed with him. Does that mean you felt he should step aside and just were not vocal about that?
No, I guess what I'm saying to you, Marshall, is one, I had a responsibility, again, as the assistant Democratic leader in the caucus, to engage with every member of the caucus and facilitate them giving their feedback to Leader Jeffries, who I work closely with, so that he could then ultimately convey the views of our caucus to President Biden. I will say, just in terms of directly answering your question, I was very empathetic to both arguments, and I actually held a number of town halls over the course of the last month and heard directly from constituents, both in that venue, but also in other venues as well, community meetings and the like. And there was a real diversity of views. I don't think it was mutually exclusive to believe that, and I do believe that the president will be remembered as one of the most consequential in the modern history of the country, but to also have had concerns, which I did have, about the president's, ultimately electoral prospects in terms of him proceeding at the top of the ticket. I didn't really see it as a binary. I said publicly at the time, multiple times to a number of different outlets, that it was the president's decision, that he was the presumptive nominee, but that ultimately he would have to make the decision that he believed was in the best interest of the country. My job was to try to solicit as many opinions as I could, both from my constituency as a congressman and from my caucus colleagues as the assistant leader, and then convey those in an unvarnished way to the White House through the leadership, which I did. So I'm comfortable, as I said, with my role, and I agree with the president's decision and really focused on the next steps forward over the course of the next 100 days.
It sounds like you've described being a facilitator, which leads to my next question. In trying to schedule interviews with you following the president's debate against former President Trump, after the attempted assassination of former President Trump, and after Vice President Harris announced she was going to run for office, we either got silence or we got brief statements from your office. As you've mentioned several times, you're the fourth highest in House Democratic leadership. So what do Coloradans get from that, other than the appearance of perhaps being less accessible and less forthcoming?
Well, I would respectfully disagree with that characterization, Marshall. We've done a lot of interviews over the last 10 days with local media. Did a couple interviews with CBS4 last week about some of the topics that you mentioned, but also about other work that we're doing in the community, a variety of different events that we did to honor veterans in Fort Collins. We just did a bunch of interviews this morning with Fox 31 and with, I think, CBS4 as well, and a number of interviews with other local outlets. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I just disagree with their characterization on that front, and obviously welcome the opportunity to be able to engage with you today about whatever topic you'd like to talk about.
How about the part about less forthcoming? In your answer previously, it seemed like, again, you're playing the facilitator role that I don't want to say. I'm trying to gather people. Are you silenced now because you're in leadership?
No, not at all. Far from it. I mean, as I said, I don't know if you want to rehash the questions about the president's decision to stay in the race, but as I said previously, I articulated publicly that I had conflicting views about the path forward, and that ultimately I thought it was the president's decision to make. That I didn't see it as binary. I understand that that you do, and that others do as well. And obviously, I respect that opinion also. But no, far from it. I mean, again, I would just say, just for context, Marshall, I've had the privilege of serving in this new leadership role for, I guess, about 4 months now. During that same time period, we've held town halls in Frisco. We've held them in Clear Creek County. We've held a few in Boulder. We've done government and grocery events. Historically, I've done more town halls than any member of the Colorado congressional delegation. I believe that that's true for this year, and actually have done more town halls than some of my colleagues combined. So, I mean, we're staying engaged, and as I said, I think probably, well, I don't want to compare to other congressional offices, but we're staying connected to my constituency. I've always believed that. We've been recognized for it, and we're going to continue to make that a priority.
Back to the vice president now running for president.
Sure.
The list of potential vice presidential candidates for Harris is heavy on white males. What does it say that a minority female candidate is expected to find a white male running mate to help her electability?
Well, I guess I would say I don't agree that that's the expectation. I mean, that's certainly not. I think that the vice president, and I've worked with her for many years, both in her capacity as vice president, but also as a U.S. senator when she was a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, which, as you know, as I'm a member of as well. And I trust her to have the best judgment in selecting who she believes will be the most talented, most thoughtful governing partner, and the most effective vice president for our country. I think that's the standard. I don't know. I don't have visibility into the specific, all the specific people who are being considered or vetted. I know I've read the same reports you have, and so I get what you're saying in terms of some of the public reporting about who's being considered, but I guess, without knowing for certainty who's actually on that list, I don't know that that is necessarily the case. It's not my expectation. I guess I would just say that. I've always believed that merit matters and that you select the best and most talented people. By the way, it's why I'm excited about Vice President Harris's candidacy for president. I think she's one of the most qualified candidates for president of the United States, probably in the last quarter century, with the exception of Joe Biden, just in terms of her public service record. She served as a U.S. senator of our country's largest state. She was attorney general, of course, a district attorney, and now vice president. So yeah, that's how I read it.
Can you tell me of a time you had concern that President Biden should not continue running for re-election?
Can you repeat the question, Marshall?
Yeah,
The time
sorry.
that I was concerned, or
A time that you were concerned that he should not consider running for re-election. Is there a time that you said, I should tell him that?
yeah, I mean, certainly after the debate. I mean, I think I had the same reaction that a lot of Americans, certainly a lot of Coloradans, did after the debate in terms of the president's performance during the debate. And, I think legitimate questions were raised about, the electoral prospects in light of both the debate and the perceptions around his performance. And that was something that I certainly was concerned about, that I heard from constituents, that I also heard from colleagues. But just to be clear, I also heard the alternative view, as I suspect you did. Again, part of this is because I do so many town halls and community events, I get a lot of feedback. And, ultimately, my constituency, much like the state, those who are interested in, the Democratic Party politics, I should say, in terms of who the Democratic Party would nominate as their candidate, were very conflicted. And there were views of some who believed very passionately that he should stay as the nominee. And of course, as you know, in our delegation as well, there were folks who felt that as well. So yeah, I've always prided myself from day one, and you've probably heard me say this before, I think maybe perhaps in one of our interviews, that I try to listen first and lead locally. And so it's a big part of my job as a congressman. It's a big part of my job as the assistant leader, and try to get it right as often as I can.
We heard about Congressman Crow getting to say his piece on a phone call. Did you ever get a chance to say anything directly to the president?
I did not speak directly to the president. As I said, I serve in the House leadership, and so was part of that process to ultimately funnel up the information to Leader Jeffries, who did meet directly with the president and presented the caucus's views.
More currently, do you feel the president's decline was covered up by Democratic leadership like yourself?
I don't believe that, no.
Do you believe there needs to be an investigation about a cover-up of President Biden's decline?
No. I mean, again, the president has been out front. He's delivered a number of speeches in just the last 2 weeks, including, I thought, one of the most compelling speeches of his entire public service career, which has been a distinguished career over 50 years, just a few days ago on, I believe it was Tuesday, right? Or sorry, Wednesday evening. And so, no, I don't. I think that that's a spurious argument that's being made by, unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I think that's unfortunate. I don't buy into that argument.
I just have a couple more, and I know you've got somewhere to be.
No, it's all right.
Your colleague, Congressman Caraveo, was one of 6 Democrats who voted yesterday with Republicans, quote, strongly condemning Vice President Harris for her handling of the border. Was that a Republican smear campaign?
Well, I guess what I would say is just a couple of things. First and foremost, Yadira Caraveo is a personal friend. She's a treasured colleague. Our districts are adjacent to each other. I think she's done a fabulous job representing the people of Adams County and Weld County. And she is a rising star in our party. And I'm just very grateful that she's been willing to serve in this capacity. I would say with respect to your particular question, and just kind of more broadly, the Democratic Party is not a monolith, right? I mean, we're a big tent party. We have a diversity of views within the House Democratic Caucus, and we're not all going to see every resolution or every bill that comes before us the same way. As you know, I voted against the resolution that you referenced. Congresswoman Caraveo was not the only Democrat to vote for it. There were others as well. And so, look, if anything, I think the fact that we have a richness of views and that we can have a healthy debate and agree to disagree, but nonetheless be undergirded by our shared values is what makes the Democratic Party strong and, frankly, very different. Again, without to get too partisan here, but very different from my colleagues on the other side who, are very much kind of towing the party line, irrespective of their underlying views on the matter. So there is space to be able to reach a different conclusion, and I reached a different conclusion about that resolution.
Why do you think she participated in voting for that?
You'd have to ask her for her rationale in terms of why she supported the resolution. I haven't spoken to her about that.
Well, let me ask it this way. What do you think for participating and voting for it?
What was that?
What do you think about her yes vote for that?
I think that she is voting. Well, I guess what I would say is that I'm not going to speak for her and her decision making about why she votes on a particular piece of legislation. We take literally hundreds of votes. Last week, we took a number of votes on amendments, on funding bills. Myself, Congresswoman Caraveo, and by the way, other members of the Democratic delegation, and as you can imagine, Republican members of our delegation did not all agree on those amendments. There were a lot of other votes where Congresswoman DeGette and myself wouldn't necessarily agree. And I understand why, and I'm not faulting you, obviously. Of course, I know that there's kind of a myopic focus on this particular resolution, but I guess I'm just trying to provide some context that we have a space within the Democratic caucus to reach a different conclusion. I'm happy to talk to you about kind of what I believe are some of the mischaracterizations about the vice president's record as it relates to immigration. And I can only speak for my rationale in terms of voting against that resolution, or just more broadly, some of my criticisms of how the Republicans have been, I think, attacking the vice president in a way that is not consistent with the facts.
I don't need to belabor. I mean, you're right. It is more of a question for her, which we've tried to ask directly to her, but I appreciate you providing that context. I'll wrap up. Some national reporting suggests that Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi still calls the shots, and that Democrats, including yourself and all the way up to President Biden, follow her direction. Is that an accurate picture of how things work behind the scenes?
I have not seen the reporting that you're suggesting. That's certainly not accurate, and I haven't read those news reports. I can only speak to what I experienced, which is again, being a part of the leadership team, working with Leader Jeffries, with Whip Clark from Massachusetts, from Chairman Aguilar, who's the chairman of our House Democratic Caucus from California. I think there's a incredibly talented new generation of leadership that's led in the House exceedingly well over the last 18 months, and I know. We have limited time, but maybe perhaps you do another interview about sort of the last 18 months of the 118th Congress. A lot of dysfunction, government shutdown, showdowns, potential default on our national debt, national security supplemental that we worked really hard to get across the line. On every occasion, Leader Jeffries, with the help of a united House Democratic Caucus, which of course includes Speaker Emerita Pelosi, who's has been a champion for American families for generations. We've been a very united party and a united caucus, and it's why I think we've actually been able to, in some respects, govern, notwithstanding that we have the minority in the House of Representatives.
I'm not going to ask you if you're going to run for governor, but what I do want to ask to conclude is, will the results of the November election inform your decision of whether or not you want to run for governor?
No, Marshall, what I would say is my focus, and I'm sure this answer is not going to necessarily placate your question, but just to be honest and candid, my focus really is on doing the job that I've been elected to do by the voters of the second congressional district. It's an honor. It's something I don't take lightly. 6 years ago, we were able to make history when I was elected as our state's first Black congressman, and it's something I am proud to be able to serve every day, helping the people of Colorado. I'm focused on that. Of course, I'm focused on winning a majority in the House of Representatives. But to be also just candid with you, I'm also focused on my family. I've got, a 5-year-old daughter, a 1-year-old son. I think, as you probably know, my wife was battling breast cancer for the last 8 months. It has been an incredible, resilient champion during what has been a very difficult time for her. So, and our family. So we're very focused on family and on doing my job, and I'll let the politics figure itself out down the road.
Yeah, I can't imagine going through that after 4 months of having given birth. So I hope she's doing okay.
Thank you. Thank you. No, she's doing great, and she's getting better every day. And we're very grateful to the community and to friends and to so many folks who just, had an outpouring of support over the last few months.
Sure thing. Thank you for talking with us. I appreciate it. And thank
Yeah,
you,
of
Greg.
course. Of course. You got it.